This is the second lecture in a series of 6 on Vincent van Gogh. It's about his 2 years in Paris, which were a major turning point in his short, brilliant career. But I can show you how rational and purposeful and hard-working he was during his 2 years in Paris, where he underwent an astonishing transformation.
Hi, 各位大家好，今天是2019年7月20号。那我今天要讲的题目啊，叫做从 Gustave Doré 啊，就是中文把它翻译成多雷啊，这个法国的插画名家啊，这1832年到1886年，从 Doré 到这个梵谷哈，逗点这个在永恒之门。这个是2018年的一部电影啊，那这个电影的特色啊，就是大部分都是从梵谷自己的这个说过的话、这些想法出发来拍他的这个后半生，所以这个来谈这个东西。那其实重点的话就在谈这个Doré的一些著名的插画啊。插画，那其中有一个，这个多雷的这个插画，各位我们那个打那个博客来跟这个多雷啊，大家可以看到出来，就是说，现在他的插画啊，世界名著里面啊，不管是这个拉伯雷的这个《巨人传》啊，法国的著名的，或者是这个斯乐园啊，米尔顿的斯乐园。啊，或者是这个，很多等一下我们会看到，几乎7、8本啊，这个神曲啊，但丁的神曲等等，7、8本的话，这个在现在市面上还是可以买得到啊。不过我想就是说，这个大概涵盖不到多瑞的一些插画，著名的插画的一半了啊。那他有一个。很有名的这个一本跟人家合作的，就是《London a Pilgrim》啊，就是在写那个这个60年代，1860年到这个70年啊，这个多瑞到2、3次到伦敦啊，那他跟人家合作，他文字是他的朋友写的，可是他在这里面啊有180这个幅的插画。那这个180幅的插画里面呢，其中有一个很有名的一个伦敦的监狱里面呢，的这个放风啊，就是一些犯人在这个出来晒太阳啊，他都在室内啊，在兜着这个打圆圈啊。那这个多瑞的这幅画啊，这个在蛮后面的在这本书里面的136页啊，就是多瑞的这幅画的话，那梵谷的话，这个很喜欢呐，就把它这个重新加以这个摹写啊，布置出来，相当不错啊，光线啊，那后面的那个监狱的窗户等等都比较清楚啊，这是很有名的这个东西。那这本书在1882年的时候啊，梵谷在海牙。就是买不起啊！他说那个书商跟他要的这个价钱，那梵谷买不起，就是买不起这本。那现在在这个，我想大概几百块钱啊，这个一个多本的这个的复制本啊，很容易找到，很有意思啊。这个梵谷啊，在永恒之门之间啊，他还讲了一个这个2016年左右啊。有一群专家说，这个发现的梵谷的50几张的素描，啊，那他就把它弄在这个电影里面啊，就是说，那个在法国的那个南部的的这个地方的一个女性啊，这个梵谷是因为那个女的给他一个空白的那个账册啊，那个东西就给他给画素描，那电影是这样说。 梵谷就把他就画了一些很多的素描，后来要离开的时候就送给那个女的没有看，就把它当作是账册一样，就把它归档，说125年、26年以后才被发现的。那这个是2016年的时候啊，这个消息蛮轰动的，可是这个阿姆斯特丹的这个梵谷博物馆啊，那边的专家，他们说认为说这新发现的所谓的这些素描啊，是伪造的啊，所以可是，在电影里面呢，没有把说这个梵谷博物馆的意见啊表达出来。那这个电影啊，其实是在讲的一个是说，梵谷很多人就认为是梵谷最后的时候是用枪啊，这个打了腹部啊自杀啊。那这个电影的这个意思就是说，它里面呢很多的强调啊，这个譬如说，这个梵谷在法国上面写生，乡间写生啊，那这个老师带小孩子啊，出来郊游啊，结果大家都去嘲笑这个梵谷啊，这等于说从小孩到老师啊，都很仇视这个艺术家了啊。那电影的这个最后的意思就是说，梵谷还是给一些青少年啊，拿出家里的这个父亲的这个手枪啊，就把打死了，然后把那个枪丢到河中心去。那梵谷自己也不收这个，也不收出来，所以这个躺着2-3天以后过世了，人生就这样过世了啊。那电影比较特殊的东西就是说，这个梵谷过世的时候，那个棺木啊，这个棺木里面就是梵谷，然后因为这个他的可爱的最了不起的一个弟弟啊 ，Theo 里面跟他的这个跟梵谷的通信集啊，这个已经是全世界的名著了啊。这个名著里面的话，这个都有很多。那电影里面就是讲说，Theo 他弟弟跟他讲说，你的画被收购了等等啊。那梵谷有一次就到巴黎去的这个老弟的家中啊，才发现原来他的画并不是被人家买去啊，都是给他老弟这个收藏在他自己的家里。那过世的那一幕啊，就是说大家来跟那个梵谷告别。那个棺木的周围啊，都是梵谷的一些画啊。那大概就是Theo他老弟就是说，这个你这些生平的好友啊，这些作品啊，你如果认为不错的话，就请你带一幅回去吧啊，就是等于说做一个纪念吧。所以电影可以表现出不同的这个做法啊，不管是翻案啊，就是说那个自杀或他杀了。那电影甚至把这一幅梵谷的这一幅啊，这个放空的这个东西啊，在那个表现说梵谷在那个精神病院里面啊，那些病人的话也是到那个田地里面去放空啊，这个东西都是这样子这个表现出来。
Well, first, let me give you a quick sketch of his earlier life. His father, who was an evangelical Calvinist minister, his mother came from a family of art dealers. Vincent made a try for the ministry, but he failed the theology entrance exam. And for a while, he was a lay missionary to coal miners. 3 of his maternal uncles were art dealers, and he tried that too, for 3 years. At 26, he turned away from evangelical Christianity and decided to be an artist. As an art dealer had exposed him to the history of painting. But as for his own art, his interests were narrow and passionate. They were focused on the depiction of the Dutch peasantry and the land they lived on. He was resolved to become a Dutch version of his hero, Jean-François Millet, whose pictures he studied and copied all his life. He was already 32 when he painted an ambitious demonstration of his abilities, this dark and intentionally clumsy-looking picture of poor peasants at dinner eating potatoes with their hands. His painting technique developed further. in a remarkable series of broad, forceful portrait studies. He was hoping he could make money with portraits, but he was selling next to nothing, and he was financially dependent on his younger brother, who was an art dealer in Paris. In their frequent exchanges of letters, they discussed the possibility of Vincent moving to Paris and joining Theo there. Early in March, Vincent showed up in Paris unannounced. Home for Vincent and Theo was an apartment in Montmartre on high ground, where he began to work soon after he arrived. Well, you could see how skillful he is already. The light is turned gray by the heavy clouds. Colors and contrasts are muted. And by the way, the clouds loom up and darken overhead. Van Gogh was painting Paris in much the way that he'd painted Holland, under the influence of his relative and sometime coach, Anton Mauve, member of the so-called Hague School during the 1860s. You see that, especially in the rain-laden clouds that are terrifically brushy and powerful, like Mauve's. Anyway, gray skies and downbeat moods might be fine for the Dutch market, but Van Gogh knew very well that he had to work on color if he was going to sell pictures in Paris. He had to learn more about color relationships and contrasts, complementary hues, and so forth. He took a surprising tack. He tremendously admired a painter from Provence in Paris, Adolphe Monticelli, who exhibited with the Impressionists and with Cézanne. Vincent wrote to a friend, "I've made a series of color studies and paintings seeking oppositions of blue with orange, red, green, yellow and violet, seeking broken and neutral tones to harmonize brutal extremes." The color star here was what Vincent used to learn about how things worked. There you see the three primary colors, yellow at the top, blue around the right, and red at the left. He worked at improving his other skills, and he went to study figure drawing at the studio of Fernand Cormont. He met other artists there, mostly younger than he, some of whom would become important friends. Now, he might have chosen right away to paint Paris boulevards and paint familiar buildings and cafes, subjects that might sell, but instead he stayed close to home. It was not the streetscapes of Montmartre, but the parts of Montmartre that were underdeveloped or undeveloped, even rural. He explored the vegetable gardens on the back of the hill of Montmartre for subjects, behind the famous windmills, and in the cottage gardens and the gypsum quarries on top. You could see that from Jonquin's tremendously high-key Paris street scene, painted 20 years before Vincent arrived in Paris. Let me say a little more about painting out of doors, en plein air. This had been an established practice, as I said, since the 1820s, part of a boom in landscape painting generally. Painting in front of the subject was a regular thing, not just Corot, but the other Barbizon painters too, and also the young Charles d'Aubigny, who illustrated in this little etching how he floated the rivers and painted pictures like this on the spot. In the 1870s, the reputations of Manet and Monet and the Impressionist generations were built partly on just this practice of working rapidly out of doors and exhibiting what they painted there. Of course, they could, and they did, bring pictures that they'd begun in the field back into the studio and work more on them there. Just to remind you, the Impressionists got their name from a reviewer of the exhibition in 1874, where this picture by Monet was included under the title Impression Sunrise. The reviewer, Louis Leroy, made himself immortal by making fun of it as being a mere impression a sketch, not a finished painting. He called it wallpaper in its embryonic state. Monet and Pissarro had been exploring more possibilities. He'd begun to weave dense tapestries of foliage using short crisscross strokes and also pitting complementary colors against one another. Here it's the warm pink of the roof against the green of the sea to intensify the effect of bright light. Pissarro was never a painter who used big gestures with the brush, and in the 1870s, he used patches of color with not much modeling in tone, which you can best see up close in the buildings, the cow, even the cabbages. In the 1880s, like Monet, Pissarro abandoned this broader application of paint and made his surfaces denser with many smaller touches that vary in hue and value. They don't interfere with the illusion of depth and distance, and they make the whole image vibrant. He couldn't do all this out in the field. Like Monet, he brought the pictures back to his studio and worked on them further. In the mid-1880s, some much younger artists, like Georges Seurat, looked at this kind of enriched impressionism of Monet and Pissarro and felt it was passé. Seurat was 6 years younger than Van Gogh, 20 years younger than Monet. He went to Normandy in the summers and set up on the Channel coast, as Monet had been doing, but his choice of a strange cliff formation and his way of rendering the play of light on the land and sea were something new. He didn't use broad strokes or even a tangle of small strokes like Monet. He used touches of different colors. So this patient, systematic application of paint is very different from what you saw Monet and Pissarro doing. Seurat had applied his system in a view of a suburban site, that was going to be a very much larger painting of people at leisure on a Sunday morning. Van Gogh must have seen this painting, 12 feet wide, when Seurat showed it first in 1886. It's an impressionist subject treated in the most un-impressionist way possible. It's as though this group of people were fixed in this unchanging light, fixed in those poses, kind of under a spell forever by Seurat's method of rendering. It's a very different world from that of another major statement, the luncheon of the boating party, where Renoir implies that the figures move, they chat, they flirt, and the light shifts. It's another kind of developed impressionist technique. 5 years later, a critic wrote, everything was so new in this immense painting. The conception was bold, and the technique was one nobody had ever seen or heard before. This was the famous pointillism. Pissarro had anticipated Seurat's dots by some years, as you saw, and now at the age of 56, he quickly began to use the newer technique. His dots, and sometimes dashes, are fairly uniform in size and density, and there are clear, emphatic lines reinforcing roofs and eaves and walls to structure the view. Other artists in their 20s picked up the technique, and that soon included Van Gogh. This is by a younger friend of Van Gogh, made soon after he got to Paris, Paul Signac. The technique is still impressionist, based on pictures by Monet and Pissarro and others, but it's not a picture of the boulevards or of Montmartre, but instead one of the modern subjects that attracted his own generation. Railroads, iron bridges, factories at the edge of the city. Infrastructure, we might say now. And pretty soon, Signac was experimenting with Seurat's techniques, translating shady green areas on the right into masses of pink and blue touches, making them vivid and also giving the scene a kind of clear, linear structure. And a little bit later on, under a high, bright sun, Signac is doing full-on divisionist painting. He makes the road a kind of squinty expanse of dazzling light created by countless hundreds of points of contrasting colors.